Oh, all right. Well, good afternoon now, technically, everybody at 12:05 on September 21st. I am Dan Bell with the Hampton Roads Innovation Collaborative. We are the tech council for the Hampton Roads region, which is, I guess, now the 757, depending on who you talk to. Of course, depending on who you talk to, we're still in Tidewater. So it's all over the board. But we are a 501c6 nonprofit established in the late 90s. We reorganized in tail end of 2015 with a new DBA, Hampton Roads Innovation Collaborative, HRIC, and shuffled the deck pretty well. Whereas the old organization focused on incubators, we focus more on program content, and we are a volunteer-only organization. We do not have staff. We are driven by volunteers who share a passion of bringing technology and business-related programs to the region. And so that's what we do. If you're interested, the links are there to show you more about HRIC, and we'd certainly welcome your participation going forward. Membership is extremely affordable. So for food for thought. I want to thank our series sponsor, Cox, who's been just an absolute great business partner with us for several years now, and enjoys a seat on the board. And I'm looking to see if my friend and colleague Barrett Stork is online.
Hey, Dan.
Hi, Barrett. Thanks for joining us, and the microphone is yours, sir.
Sure thing. Thank you. Thank you to you and to the HRIC for all the great work to bring us these wonderful Tech Tuesday sessions. They've been amazing. I'm really looking forward to hearing what our friends at CIT have to talk to us about today. For those who've heard my commercial in the past, just a quick reminder, we've been around Hampton Roads for 40 years. We provide service in multiple areas of Virginia, but we've actually been around since 1898. So we've had a long history of working in the communications world. Weren't doing broadband at that time, some other things, but a lot of great stuff going on. One thing I did want to highlight based on our conversations today of what we've got our speakers here to talk about, we actually operate a 10 gig lightwave research network in Hampton Roads that connects some of our higher ed and research facilities. So hoping that can also be something that is beneficial for the region in the long run when it comes to helping to make this a more tech hub for the Commonwealth and for the country, really. So a lot of great things, a lot of great investments happen. I won't bore you with that, Dan, but I appreciate your opportunity to say a few words and look forward to hearing from our speakers today.
Where the hell did he just go?
You're on mute, Dan. Dan, you're on mute.
We had one less hot mic than I wanted. Anyway, thank you, Barrett. You've been around since, not you, but Cox has been around since 1898, and many people have accused me of being around that long too, but it's not true. So anyway, once again, thank you to Cox and to yourself. I'd like to introduce our speakers for today. In no particular order, Mr. David Erie, Chief Technology Officer of Virginia Center for Innovative Technology, and Mr. Sean Mallon, VP of Entrepreneurial Ecosystems at Center for Innovative Technology. And so I am going to turn off my mic and camera and turn it over to these two fine gentlemen, which I believe will deliver some outstanding content today. So the gentlemen, the program is yours.
Well, thank you, Dan. Thank you, Barrett, for the introduction and your support. My name is Sean Mallon, and Dave Erie. I have the pleasure of kicking things off, and Dave is going to take us deep into the detail of the Virginia Innovation Index and our strategic roadmap. But we're thrilled to be here. I was advertised prior to this, and Dan just introduced me as the VP for Entrepreneurial Ecosystems, and I was indeed in that role until about 3 weeks ago, and then we did a little switcheroo internally. So Conaway Haskins, who's taken over the responsibility for entrepreneurial ecosystems, happens to be on the call today. Conaway, thanks for joining us. anyway, so that's us, and then Dave Erie, you'll have plenty of chance to hear from him here in a few minutes. So
You switched to mute again, Sean.
can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, good. I'm not sure when that happened. So if you missed it all, you didn't miss much. Dave, you're driving the slide, so I'm going to have you advance for me, and we'll kick this thing off.
There we go.
So we are, CIT is the designated nonprofit, and we actually sit beneath this, what you see here on the slide, the Virginia Innovation Partnership Authority, or VIPA as it's colloquially referred to. It's a state authority. So we derive most of our funding, not all of it, but a lot of it from the state to do work around the states in support of entrepreneurship and startup companies. And what you see here are the 4 groups within CIT. So I'm just going to go through them very quickly to give you a sense of all the things that we do. We're only about 30 people in the organization, but we do a lot. So entrepreneurial ecosystems, I referenced that a minute ago. In terms of this is a new division for CIT, and this is one where we work with regions, and within the regions, many of you are probably familiar with Go Virginia. We work very closely with Go Virginia to ensure that there's support for regional entrepreneurial ecosystems. So these are the entrepreneurial support organizations that work directly with entrepreneurs to advance them through their idea stage and launch stage and revenue generation, et cetera. The commercialization division, the main product here is a grant program that we've had at CIT for many years now. Many of you will have heard of the CRCF program, the Commonwealth Research Commercialization Fund. We've just recently rebranded that, in the process of rebranding it to the Commonwealth Commercialization Fund. And that's basically non-dilutive grant funding that can go to both private sector startups as well as startups and spin-outs associated with the state's higher educational institutions. So colleges and universities, primarily the research universities throughout Virginia. And that's the division that I've recently taken over the leadership for. The investment division is basically our equity investment arm. Again, many of you hopefully have heard about the CIT Gap Fund. That's run out of the investment division. It's been making equity investments in Virginia technology startups for about 16 years now. About 250 investments have been made, and as of this speaking, I think about 150 of them are alive and well. This is early stage, highly speculative investments where this is not a world that you're familiar with. If you have a 100% success rate, you're either a genius or you're doing something very wrong. So we have a very good success rate, and we've been seeing returns from our early investments. Generally speaking, the investment division does, between 15 and 25 new investments each year, new companies. So they're really looking for the best and the brightest among Virginia's technology entrepreneurs. And then the strategic initiatives piece here, and Dave you'll hear a lot more about that from Dave as we continue through, but Dave heads that up. And it's really about looking out over the horizon at strategically meaningful opportunities for Virginia. So we have activities in unmanned systems and cybersecurity and resilient cities and towns and things like that. Again, I feel like I'm stepping on Dave's toes, so I'm just going to shut up and let him fill in the details when he starts to talk.
Actually, you did pretty well there, Sean. The only other thing I would say is a big emphasis on public safety as well.
Public safety, indeed. So on the next slide, what you see here is what we call a capital continuum, and it's a bit of an eyesore, and in a second, we'll move on to something that's a little easier to look at. What you see in the gray bars there are the CIT programs. So Commonwealth Commercialization Fund, I referred to a moment ago, CIT Strategic Initiatives, that's Dave's programs, and then the CIT Gap funds. But the reason I wanted to show you all of this is to give a sense of the funding sources that are available to startups in general. As you can see on the left, there's kind of a category that would fall into grant programs, which means that, basically organizations like what you're doing and they'll literally just give you money to do it. And then there are, and this doesn't include, by the way, certain program. Oh, I guess it does. SBIR and STTR, the green bar is the federal funding for early stage startups. Then you have at the bottom, you see the equity program. So CIT Gap funds, like angel investors, like venture capital, are actually taking a percentage of the company that you invest in. That's the quid pro quo. We'll give you money, but you give us a percentage of the business so that when you grow and become very successful, we all get a financial return out of that. So we, particularly in the Gap funds, look through a lens that's similar to what many venture capital investors look like. So Dave, just go to the next slide real quick, and this just kind of cleans it up. But you can see here for the CIT Gap programs that we really work kind of going from left to right, all the way from research stage, right? So when people are just kind of at the research bench, they've invented something or they think that they've got something interesting. And our programs and programs throughout the state work with them to move through this kind of proof of concept stage through product development and then turning on the revenue spigot and then scaling the businesses. And as you can see, our programs support companies throughout those phases. Next slide, please, Dave. Okay. So this program was advertised as the CIT Strategic Roadmap. So we're going to tell you a little bit about that. So the roadmap is, in its current form, is something that's been around conceptually since about 2011. We were asked by the Commonwealth of Virginia to design and maintain and reissue the roadmap every few years. And it's really designed to be has been designed to be a planning tool. And it helps the Commonwealth stakeholders overall to identify research areas, as you can see here, worthy of investment, right? That will have the potential to generate economic development and growth in state tax revenues and jobs for the state. So it identifies key industry sectors. We'll look at that in just a second, that will drive growth in Virginia. In the most recent, so CIT actually managed the roadmap process through until 2017. And then for a period of time, that responsibility was transitioned to SHEV, which is the State Council for Higher Education. They issued a roadmap in December of 2019. And as you will learn over the next few minutes, that responsibility has transitioned back to CIT. The new product will be called the Virginia Innovation Index. Next slide, please, Dave. So just to give you a sense of what the roadmaps have looked like I said a minute ago, we've been doing these roadmaps since 2011. And so there have been 4 versions of it. And in each one, we have basically highlighted those industries that are especially worthy of state support and investment. And we don't really need to go through each one, but I think what you can see here is that the common theme throughout is that they represent industries that have the potential they are now and have the potential to become even larger industries. So if you think about, energy and clean energy, that's something that was important 10 years ago in 2011, and it's even more important today. IT has been on the roadmap all the way through for obvious reasons, life sciences as well. Unmanned systems is more of a recent addition to it, because unmanned systems have become more relevant and more important in the last, at least more broadly appreciated to be important for the last few years. I'm going to, I think, go to the next slide, Dave, and hand it off to you. And as Dan said, feel free to put questions into the chat box as we see them. As Dave is speaking, he can try to answer them, or we can certainly take them once we're done in the Q&A. Thank you all.
Yeah, thank you, Sean. And again, I can talk for a long time about the strategic initiatives area and some of the great work we're doing there, but not going to do that today. This is really want to focus on the innovation index. As you can see, there was the requirement for that was established by the legislature in 2020 to replace the roadmap. We've been working on it for a number of months now. It's still in development. So this is actually one of the first times we've kind of publicly presented some of this information where we think this is going. So, we invite your feedback. We want this to be a collaborative process to develop this as what we hope will be a useful tool across the Commonwealth. As you can see, we certainly hope it will guide our CIT programs, but also provide a useful approach for the legislature in their considerations, for the executive branch, for anybody who's really involved in the innovation ecosystem in Virginia. Here's some extract from the actual legislation. I'm not going to read it all, but just a couple of things highlighted in green there. So the goal here is a comprehensive strategic plan for the Commonwealth. And as you look towards the bottom, to help ensure that the investment of public funds are for projects that have significant potential for commercialization and economic growth in the Commonwealth. So here's some of our takeaways from reading that legislation. First of all, build on the prior work. And as Son just indicated, there's been a lot of prior work there. Although we're looking to update the methodology, we're not trying to throw away the history and start over. There's so much that's, I think, really been positive for Virginia in that process. But one of the big things that we'd like to do, and this is based on the phrase, significant potential for commercialization and economic growth. I think our interpretation there is that's a forward-looking mandate. That's a kind of a crystal ball. And so, are there ways that we can be more predictive about what those growth areas are rather than retrospective? And as a result of that, we've done several things as we've developed kind of this innovation index. First of all, let me acknowledge key partners. I wouldn't be here without their work and support. So I think both of them are actually on this session today. Mr. Steve Dennis is a consultant for us, and Dr. Dan Maxwell with his own company, CAD-SCI. Both have done extensive work in data science, analytics, and using that for portfolio development for the federal government and others. So here are a couple of things that we've done. Added a framework, and so this is kind of a common language, a common way that we hope people will adopt to think about what innovation means and how we should parse that across the Commonwealth. Additionally, we're I think nearing completion of the first iteration of a model, and a model here being, can we define observable predictive metrics to look at these opportunities, and then finally an index, and that an index here being kind of a ranking of candidate investment areas. And I see a question in the chat: or is CIT working with economic development to ensure the Commonwealth has an adequate talent base? And yes, absolutely. Part of the way we're doing that is building on kind of the prior work and the ongoing work that a number of groups are doing. So just briefly on these are from previous roadmaps. There are a number of kind of what I would call catalogs of either regional priorities. So here's one that's geographically based, university priorities based on the research areas, business priorities also. So no, a number of different kind of roll-ups of priorities in different areas. I catalog economic development as one of the sets of expert inputs that we look at. So certainly VEDP puts out a lot of great information. Here's an extract from their most recent strategic plan, and we're working with them. They're nearing completion of a new version of this, and so we certainly hope to take advantage of the updated information. A number of you, I'm sure, are familiar with the taxonomy report from a couple of years ago. Virginia Academy of Science, Engineering, and Medicine just has a board meeting actually in a couple of days, and they're going to provide a report out on a new report that they've put together that will be presented to JCOTS on strategic areas for the Commonwealth. Another kind of thing we've looked at, there is a ton of information out. So there are various rankings now that are out there. So CIT's GAP funds, 7 years in a row now, has been named the most active investor in Virginia. 2 years in a row, we're the #1 state in the country for unmanned aircraft systems, UAS. Ranked right up there in business climate. Generally, depending on the ranking that you look at and the specific topic area, Virginia will rank in the middle of the top 10, sometimes higher, sometimes lower. That's fairly typical. We've looked at academic research. How do you build an index? And actually, there's been surprisingly, to my mind, surprisingly little academic research in this area. There's been some work in Europe. How do you construct an innovation scorecard? You can see kind of in the lower left, Switzerland, Sweden, the more economically better off countries tend to do better on that kind of index technology. This article from MIT Technology Review just came out in the last few days. An artificial intelligence approach to predicting scientific priorities. Now, I'm a little skeptical of artificial intelligence in this context. It tends to be a black box, and it's has the classic downfall of explainability not being one of the strong points. I think when we're talking about Virginia economic investment, in many ways, that's a political process. That's a process of building groups of people who all agree that some set of areas is really important to the economic development. So I'd hate to kind of turn that over to a black box kind of system, but all of these types of approaches are, I think are informative. And so, how do we make sense of all that information, right? I mean, how do we take advantage of all the great work that's done by so many groups and really trying to put some structure around it in a way that's going to help us make decisions about investment? And so here's, I think, a summary of kind of the goals that we've been working on. We want to inform decision makers about potential high growth areas. And we want to do that based on observable predictive metrics. So, as I say, I think this is certainly there's a political aspect to this process, but I'd hate for that to be the only reason, whoever can put the largest group together or the largest interest group. We certainly would like some decisions based on information that's available in the world. I'd like to provide a consistent basis for comparison across industry sectors, research areas, and so forth. And so, talked about unmanned systems, for example, right? We have done quite well in Virginia in the infrastructure for unmanned systems. We have some of the first commercial package delivery services operating in the Commonwealth. The next big thing out there is advanced air mobility, so autonomous air taxis. A lot of people are talking about that now. And so one type of question is, should we go all in for that kind of approach, or should we continue to build out the infrastructure that's going to help grow the existing business? It's, you know, a difficult question to think about. And one thing that we'd like to come out of this then is quantitative inputs at the margin. So it's not start from a blank sheet of paper and reinvent what we're doing in terms of innovation investment. But where's the next $1 million going to go, right? Should it, you know, what's the most productive use of that next $1 million? Since we're in times right now where there's a fair amount of money flowing around the system, or if times get tight in the future, where should we think about, you know, downsizing that last $1 million? A couple things that we're not trying to do and with this index. And so the first of those is eliminate the need for human decision making. Again, I'm not at this point willing to say that we ought to turn it over to some black box automated system. I think there's plenty of room for debate, for discussion, for you know, thoughtful decision making around what's best for the Commonwealth. We're not trying to place hard limits on individual sectors or investments. And so I think we're fortunate. We have a lot of professionals. Sean Mallon, for example, is one with a lot of experience in making investments. Certainly 757 has a lot of expertise in that area. And so I think what we're trying to do is provide a mechanism for prioritizing investments, prioritizing sectors, but in a much more informative way rather than a prescriptive way. And finally, at least in the short term, we're not trying to update that set of industry sectors that Sean showed you a bit earlier for two reasons. One is, so this is a new approach, the index, and so we'd certainly like to get you know, as much you know, sort of agreement as we can from all the stakeholder groups who are involved that this is a reasonable approach. Secondly, I think that you know, COVID has been such a disruptive influence in terms of you know, business and in terms of many aspects of our lives. You know, I think it's a fraud exercise to try to predict what the long-term impacts of that are. So we'll look to do this over a little bit longer period of time, but not in the near term. All right, so what's the framework look like? I kind of think of this as a sort of a three-dimensional graph. Again, a framework here being a common way to think about these type of questions. Certainly geography is important, right? I mean, there's a lot of diversity in geography in the Commonwealth. Different areas have different strengths, they have different focus, they have different economic situations, and we have to be able to take that into account. I think the second area is industry, and you know, we can all come up with a list of industry sectors that we think are important and start looking industry by industry, both at the overall job growth. These are overall job growth numbers, but then what would that mean, for example, if we talk about unmanned systems in Region 1, or if we talk about, you know, data science in the Hampton Roads area. So that's kind of the industry view. And then the third piece here is competitiveness. And you know, I think from the VEDP report, again, you can see that Virginia tends to rank in the middle of the top 10 by and large. But there's also a question about industry maturity. I pulled this Gartner hype cycle from 2017 rather than 2020. 2020, everybody's still excited about all the industries on there. The industries that started in 2017, some of those have now reached what they call the trough of disillusionment, or starting to be more mature industries. And if we think about innovation investment, you know, we probably want to be selective about what stage of the maturity of the industry we're looking at. If something's a mature, stable industry, perhaps there's an opportunity to invest if somebody thinks they can be disruptive in that industry. Otherwise, that's a bit of a hard sell from an innovation point of view. So here's the process that we think. And again, the Techonomy report has a very similar process to what I'm showing in the graphic there. You know, R&D activity is what we tend to think about in university research, and you know, kind of the products that come out of there. There's also a lot of innovation that goes on in entrepreneurial spaces that's not necessarily connected to university research. The infamous valley of death there is in the middle. How you take it from an idea, from a piece of intellectual property, and really move that into market. And that's what we're talking about here now. Is the biggest block there on the right is when you can bring products to market in a growing industry, because that's where the jobs are. That's where the ongoing stream of innovation can happen for companies that are established in particular spaces. And finally, in terms of a framework, we think about ecosystems, and there are various ways to characterize this here. Here are a couple different examples. I think one of the things based on our experience is that for an ecosystem to make sense, it needs kind of to have balanced growth across the ecosystem. So if you have a large workforce, but you have no market, as indicated in the blue there, that's not going to create a lot of jobs. If you have entrepreneurs, but there's no intellectual property for them to be developing, not going to create a lot of jobs. So, I think the notion here is that, if you're in the situation like shown in the blue part of the diagram there, some sort of unbalanced growth in the ecosystem, in that case, investing additional $1 million in workforce development isn't going to get you the kind of outcomes that you're hoping to achieve. All right, so let's switch now to the model. That was kind of quickly on the framework. Hope those are useful ways to think about the context in which innovation happens and how it works. Here's a first cut at the model, and we've used these kinds of modeling approaches before. They're really kind of the overall goal on the left, the Economic Innovation Index or Virginia Innovation Index. In this case, it's broken down into 5 key areas, and you can see those listed there. And each of those areas then has a set of 2 or 3 metrics underneath it, which are the observable, predictive kind of metrics that I mentioned earlier. Now, there's a science actually to picking these kinds of objectives and the underlying metrics. You want them to be each informative without overlaps. You want them to give you a pretty good picture of the space that you're trying to achieve. And so you can see some of the things there. Entrepreneurial energy, for example. Here's some data around how startups have fared, how early stage companies have fared, the amount of investment, the number of investments that go into it. Again, in terms of critical industry areas, it kind of predicted job growth. Here's a report that looks at top markets. And so just briefly here, right, this one has electric cars listed as number 1. Back to our framework around geography. Well, what's the role for Virginia in the electric car market? Is there going to be a lot of production here? Maybe the limiting factor is availability of semiconductor chips, and so we ought to be investing in the Virginia semiconductor industry as their way to take advantage of the electric car market. A lot of kinds of questions like that you look to answer. Here's a more specific example. So this is under the quality of life objective, and 2 of the metrics that we're working with are community resilience, and also population migration. So this objective reflects the fact that if people don't want to be where you are, then you're going to have a hard time growing the industry, right? If people don't want to be in Virginia, then our economy is going to struggle. Here, interesting example of predictive metrics. And so North American Van Line looks at in-migration and out-migration based on where people move. They do that with a 10-year history each year. And in the little map of the US, you can see the blue states are the ones within migration, the red states without migration. Virginia's pretty stable, it's in the middle. But we think that may be a predictive metric for where job growth will be. So you can see some of these blue states. Here's some data that just was published by the Washington Post. The growth rates in Florida, Texas, North Carolina, Georgia, all these blue states in the Sun Belt have done quite well over the last year. California, where there's out migration, has not done as well in terms of job growth. This particular article that was in the Washington Post was speculating about what some of the recent legislative changes in Texas might do to in-migration and out-migration. So that'll be an interesting case study to keep an eye on as we go forward. All right, so I can't put a model out there like this without trying to validate it. Don't want to be in a position to say, well, trust my word, we're sure it's going to be great. Over the longer term, how we're going to do this? Well, we'll take a look, track some of these metrics, see how they do, and adjust the model as we go. If I tell you that quantum computing is going to be a high growth industry in 2 years or 5 years, we get 3 years in and it's flatlining, we need to go back and test our assumptions and see why we led to believe that might have been a good area in the first case. But in the shorter term, we actually can use some of our recent history. And so what we're doing here, in addition to the framework and the model and so forth, is to pick several areas that have been successful, wind our time machine backwards a couple of years and look at what the available indicators were at that point that these would be successful areas. And things like, were there stakeholder groups that are formed or strategic plans in place? Do the growth projections justify the attention? Are there new job categories being created? Are there academic programs that are out there? All of things that are kind of early indicators that an area might be good. So we're working on 3 use cases right now that we at various stages of maturity. CIT has some involvement in each of these, and so we can, I think, get a pretty robust data set. So first one is the unmanned systems area, which I would classify as a current success. So we have a viable ecosystem. We have a lot of companies. People want to move into Virginia. The package delivery area is growing rapidly, and we think that will continue to be a success area. Smart communities we're looking at. This is one of the areas that VASM, the Virginia Academy of Science Science, Engineering, and Medicine will be recommending. I would categorize that as an emerging success. It looks like Virginia has a strong position. It looks like this is poised to grow as we start increasingly focus on resilience, but it's not quite mature yet. And then as our nascent success, something that looks like it could be important, but is still pretty early in the process, augmented reality, virtual reality kinds of things. So we'll look at those 3 use cases, build those out, and use those to help validate the type of model that we're doing. All right, and to wrap it up, here's some frequently asked questions about the Virginia Innovation Index. Now, these haven't been frequently asked since this is kind of the first time we presented this, so nobody's had a chance to ask them. So at this point, I'm really just, presuming that these are things that people are interested in. So far, I've talked about the framework and the model. Why do you call it an index? And so here's the reason there is that the model actually does produce outputs, and those outputs can quantitatively rank various opportunities. Now, the data here are from an actual model. The different colors on the bars indicate the various top-level objectives that I mentioned and the contribution of each of those objectives to the overall utility function for a given technology area. My colleagues, Steve and Dan, apparently had a good time coming up with anonymizing names for each of these areas. And again, this is informative rather than prescriptive. So when we've used this kind of model in the past, we don't necessarily just draw a line and take the top 5 or the top 7 or whatever. In some cases, we can say, well, these 2 cases look like they're very similar, so we'll only pick one of them. Or we can look, Roadrunner Cyber down here may have a lower score, but if there are reasons to believe that it could, lower probability but higher impact kind of opportunity, then maybe that's an area for investment as well. So that's kind of the index aspect of this overall innovation index. And the other kind of question is, well, why do you think something like this can actually work? And so we've been using similar models for several different years now to help build portfolios. This is one out of the Strategic Initiatives portfolio, a program called City Labs with with the Department of Homeland Security, Science and Technology. And here we've looked at the 3-year outcomes. So these are companies that were engaged in 2018. We're now 3 years later. Retrospectively, we've gone back and looked at the success of those companies. And so the blue data there are for the overall US for the venture capital industry. So these are professional investors. There are thousands of companies that are represented there. The orange bars are the applicants that we had to our DHS City Labs program. There's about 150 companies there. And as you can see, they're fairly comparable in terms of the distribution overall over the course of 3 years. About 20% of companies are either growing or successful. You can see the failure rates tend to be fairly high, and that's consistent with kind of the national averages that we see over time. Using this type of model, so this type of portfolio development model to rank different things, we've now worked with a number of companies that we've actually selected to participate in the DHS program. And you can see from the green area here that it's been pretty dramatic improvement. Actually, the biggest change is that, again, when we look back over the 3-year period, almost 50% of the companies that we've been working with are either growing or successful, the rest are maintaining, compared to something like 20% from both the venture industry and the representative pool that actually applied to the program. So yeah, in summary, I think our experience with this type of modeling tool is that it can, in fact, provide valuable information about future opportunities. All right, so wrap it up. Here's kind of where we are. The index is still in development. This is an evolving thing. Offline from this presentation, be happy to engage or provide additional information, solicit your feedback, ideas for how we can improve this process going forward. Again, the goal is to, a framework, model and index, supporting data-informed decision-making for the Commonwealth Innovation Investment. We're really looking at, economic growth that we can achieve returns on investment from at the margin from, where do we put the next $1 million that we want to invest? And we're doing that based on lots of inputs from lots of different places. While we're kind of fleshing this out and testing it and making sure that it's a useful approach, I think still probably the best summary of in the short term where to think about this until we get past COVID and until we kind of start to see what the future looks like as we're sticking with the list of sectors that Sean provided earlier. So with that, I went through that pretty quickly, hopefully, but happy to take questions. And thank you, Sean, for reappearing. Hopefully some of the questions are for Sean as well.
Sure, happy to be here. I just wanted to tackle, Lori asked the question, is CIT working with economic development to assure the Commonwealth has an adequate talent base to attract businesses? And yes, but, right, so we're really part of the problem rather than part of the solution, if you will, when it comes to workforce, because we spend our days trying to build companies that need to hire workforce. So we're kind of adding to the other side of the ledger, but we are active in the state's workforce innovation network, which is an aggregation of many both state agencies and private organizations that are focused on workforce development. I mentioned at the top that we work closely with Go Virginia. Go Virginia has a whole category of investment that they do in workforce development as well. So we actually track that very closely, even if it's not one of CIT's direct swim lanes. Hopefully that helps answer that question, Laurie. Other questions? You can come off of mute if you like, or type it into the chat, whatever you prefer.
I just came off mute, guys. This is Dan. Thank you once again for the materials. Great content. So I'm trying to get a handle on how do we best leverage your efforts. So you touch all regions in the Commonwealth, and so when working with entrepreneurs in our region, how do we make sure that they know the resources that CIT offers and how they can participate, and how best are you interested in working with them?
Yeah, that's a good question, Dan. And I saw that Conaway posted a link to the CIT, to the resources page on the CIT.org website. And I would encourage everybody on this call to take a look at that. We've recently updated it. And I think it's a lot more helpful now than it was. But so basically, there's statewide resources that CIT is one of the providers of, but there are others as well, and those are called out on the page. And then within the regions, you have organizations like HRIC and others that are resources as well. And I think that what entrepreneurs will typically find with CIT is that our programs, our funding programs, are not always applicable to them at the point where they're at in their growth process, right? So they may not be positioned in the right industry for a commercialization grant, or they may not have reached the level of customer traction to be a candidate for gap fund investment. But we really try institutionally very hard to make sure that founders, entrepreneurs, startups do get connected with the resources that can be most helpful with them, whether it's an acceleration program, whether it's mentorship help, whether it's introductions to a CPA or to an attorney, those kinds of things that particularly first-time entrepreneurs don't necessarily know their way around the block that well. And we try to help with that, even if we don't necessarily write checks to everybody that we interact with.
If I can put a little kind of a different lens on that as well. So, I guess my experience is that there are unique things about each of the regions in Virginia, and from the work that I do on the strategic initiatives, we try to make sure we understand those and work with the entities that are involved. And so in the Hampton Roads area, Norfolk, Virginia Beach, we've just conducted a series of workshops with the Port of Virginia around, can we use drones to improve security there? We're working with NASA Langley on advanced air mobility. Have had some interactions with the Navy and the Coast Guard around public safety and so forth. You mentioned earlier some of the great assets, the communications infrastructure that's in the entire region is pretty well unparalleled. And are there ways to leverage that kind of capacity? So when I come at this from a strategic initiatives point of view, I'm looking to provide sort of first early adopter market opportunities for entrepreneurs, and can they provide products, or can they provide services that will take advantage of some of the unique assets that are in each of the regions.
Very good, thank you. And I do know that some of the tech councils in the state, specifically Charlottesville, has just launched a database called, I think it's EcoMap, and Hampton Roads is looking at that as well, which is kind of a visual interpretation, a listing of resources all throughout the region that can help our entrepreneurs in their quest for business growth, et cetera. Of course, there's there's always the risk of garbage in, garbage out, and you have to have a program that supports that. So that's part of the deal. But have you come upon anything, the CIT have, and I asked this, I apologize for asking again, because some of that is in the slides, but do you have any specific tool like that you use as we're kicking the tires on something like EcoMap for Hampton Roads? And we certainly wouldn't want to pull the trigger on that if there were resources out there already available. But do you have anything like that is accessible by the various tech councils throughout the state? Specifically, I'm talking about HRIC.
That's right. Thanks, Dan. That's a great question. I think we are aware of what CBEC is doing in Charlottesville, and there are a number of other initiatives. EcoMap is a platform that's a commercial off the shelf. There are other initiatives going on as well. From our perspective, we do have an interest in coordinating those kinds of things around the state, but what we don't want to do is step on the toes of folks in regions that are doing things that are very kind of optimized for regional needs. So we're studying those closely and looking for ways that we can tie them together, again, without constricting what individual goals are, if that makes sense.
Yep, it sure does. Thank you.
But I would say too, as you dig in for your own regions in the Hampton Roads area, please keep us and Conaway in particular up to date, since he's kind of tracking all of those projects across the Commonwealth.
I will do that. Hi, Conaway.
I had one quick question. Since you guys are not directly a political organization, but have legislative mandates, I would assume the activities you're doing have broad political support, but how sensitive is CIT to different changes in Richmond?
Well, we're not a political organization, right? I mean, we kind of report through the Secretary of Commerce and Trade. So, executive branch authority, and we of course, our kind of first objective is to comply with the legislative mandates, whatever they happen to be. I think CIT has been around since the mid 1980s, and part of the reason for that longevity is that economic development and particularly more recently, the focus on entrepreneurial activity is something that's kind of independent of party or of whoever happens to be in the seat on any given day.
And I would add to that, Tom, too, the fact that we are an independent 501c3 from an operational standpoint, it gives us a lot of latitude to make decisions independent of any kind of potential political arm twisting or anything like that, so that we entrepreneurs that have come to us looking for funding, a vast majority of them will say, they didn't give me funding. Why is that? Because we act in that regard, we act kind of like a VC arm, and we look to validate these organizations. So we're not in the business of giving money out just because people ask for it. It's all about putting some real kind of tough criteria around expectations for growth and success for particularly around kind of customer and revenue acquisition.
I'll also add one more point, which is that in Virginia, the administration changes every election cycle, right? And so in some ways, as kind of an independent authority, we provide some continuity across administrations, some institutional memory. It works both ways. So when a new set of people come in to the executive branch, we hopefully can educate them on some of the things that we do well, but we also seek to understand from them what the updated set of priorities are for whoever the administration is at that time.
Very cool. That makes That helps me understand a little bit better. Thank you.
As a follow-up to that, how do we best frame up for or to those who ask about how they can engage with CIT? Do we just send them to your email? Is there a gateway with, here's how the program works, and you tick the boxes along the way, and then you go through the more or less Q&A, and if you think you're ready for it, then there's an execution leg on that. How do we engage?
Yeah, that's a great question, Dan. And I think that the answer is folks that might come to you and say, how do I engage with them? It's as simple as you saying, let me make an introduction. I know Sean, and I know Dave, and I know Conaway. I think that, let's start with whoever. Let's start with Sean and see if he can help. If it's not kind of right down the path of what I do, I'm going to make sure that they get connected with the right people. So it's not, as you look at our website, you'll see that it's not a big, type in your information and hit the submit button and hope that someone gets back to you. We really do operate as a group that cares very deeply about interacting face-to-face, or at least one-on-one with entrepreneurs and their counselors and mentors. And as with so many things in the world, personal introductions make their way to the top of the list.
Yeah, we do a lot of public outreach. We spend I guess before COVID, spend a lot of time on the road. So, just to echo Sean's message there, right? I mean, I think it's really the personal contact is with whoever on our staff, because I think everybody on our staff will try to vector you in the right direction. So, in some ways, any point of contact is a good one.
And I think supplementing that is, if you go to that resource page, any organization that's listed in that resource page, we know very well. And they can, if you have a relationship with them, they can connect you with us. Or you can reach out directly as well. It's just, all of our bios and whatnot are on the website, and we're available that way too. But it's nice to get a warm intro.
That's great. That's a good way to do it. So I've got 12:03 pushing 12:04 right now. So we're pretty much running out of time. I guess it's the last call for any questions that can either be typed into chat or mic'd in. Anybody additional questions? And while we're waiting for that to happen, I want to once again thank you both. Outstanding program content, doing some great things for the state. Very much appreciate your efforts. And let's see, any other questions coming in?
Well, thanks, Dan, for inviting us. It's been great.
Yeah, absolutely. I really appreciate the opportunity to kind of talk to groups and help get the message out there. Well,
thank you both very, very much. I think we'll call the program at 1:04. And again, thank you to everybody. Thank you to the participants as well that listened to the content, and hope you walked away with some great information. Again, I'll send out some slides and a link to the video, within, certainly this week. So I want to wish everybody a good day. Thank you once again, and we'll be in touch with a subsequent program, Tech Tuesday for next month. And by the way, it's related, more or less. We have Ms. Aja Dickinson with Techstars, as I'm sure you guys both know, and she will be talking about development of ecosystem 2 from their perspective, and that's her new role with Techstars. So we're greatly looking forward to that as well. So and it's all kind of tied together in some magic soup somewhere, I don't know. All right, thank you everybody. We'll end the session now. Have a great day.
Thanks.
Thanks all.
Bye-bye.